to Berlin, Germany in week 2 of the LEC summer split. With 3 games in the books for each team, we're seeing some of them rise, but also a couple performing below expectations. And 2 lineups that are looking to bounce back are the ones you see on screen here, Splyce and Excel, who face off in our first game. Hello everyone, I'm Shox, joined by Ender, Frostdrop, and Frostdrop. I knew I was going to do that, I still did it. Frostdrop and Ender. Hello guys.
I'm always the third wheel, whether it's Medivedi or Frostdrop.
Who are you?
Oh no. Ender, come on, dude. Hey, thank you all for joining me. It is day 2, a very exciting day 1, I should say. And one of the very exciting things that came out of that day was the announcement that we are going to Athens for the summer finals. I'm super hyped. I've personally never been to Greece for an esports event or for a League of Legends event, and I know the community is very fired up, so can't wait.
Yeah, it'll be my first time over there too.
Yeah, have you ever been to Greece? No? No?
No.
No?
Can be
Awesome.
spicy.
Fantastic.
No, never.
No.
Never.
Oh.
That's the only reason we're going.
Exactly.
Just for us to get to go and experience it.
All right, it's of course for the teams, and this is what the summer is all about fighting to get to Athens and to get to Worlds, and that is what all the teams started with. But before the split, we set the expectations for each team based on their spring performance, their lineups, their changes between the splits, but some of those things may have changed. And with 3 games played for each team, we wanted to take a look at some of them and where needed, adjust expectation for their performances, because I think we all came into the summer split with certain ideas about teams, but you really don't know how they're going to perform. And the first team that I want to bring up is the 7-time champions Fnatic. They are right now the 2nd best team in Europe, even though they have the same scoreline as G2 esports. And I want to know if that is along the lines of your pre-split expectations for Fnatic.
Yeah, I mean, while they disappointed, I think, in the semifinals last split against Origin, they were on a rise, a significant rise towards that second half of the split. So I think I was hopeful for them coming in, but the way they're playing is different, and it's still very good. But this was a team that used to be so much focused around getting bot lane, getting reckless ahead, and they've changed things up. They put a lot more focus now on working with Nemesis and having Broxah gank him to let him snowball.
It felt like it was more of like a cohesion thing in the sense that, you know, I think a lot of people will point at Bwipo as the underperformer. I don't think I necessarily agree with that holistically. I think the bigger issue is that Fnatic kind of conformed themselves into, this is how we play League of Legends, and this is how we think League of Legends should be played, and getting everyone on the same page versus someone underperforming or then overperforming or kind of getting back into shape, if you will. In terms of expectations, I think it's always hard when you approach Fnatic because it feels like a constant moving goalpost, if you will. Like, if they're not kings of Europe, like that's almost not good enough when your name is Fnatic.
Yeah, well, that's the word you used was disappointing. I think no one else is more disappointed than Fnatic themselves. Like, if they're not the kings of Europe, they're not happy. Disappointing semi-finals. Broxah as well has his now sub brought in with Dan. That's lit a bit of a fire onto him. And I think that's what Fnatic are going to be using in the summer to kind of prove to themselves. You know what? Not happy with how we finished, but summer split's what it's all about.
And I also really want to focus on kind of their most recent game against the likes of Origin, because we saw them in a best of 5. Origin got the better of them. They then went 0-6 versus G2. But I think that this best of 1, people will look at the recency bias and be like, okay, Fnatic won the most recent best of 1. Clearly, they are the 2nd best team in Europe. And I actually disagree with that. Like, there's no way that Origin fall prey to the same maneuver where you have the Shin, like very creative from Fnatic, to put the Shin into the mid lane to make sure that they can get a really good matchup into Aatrox, you know, leaving that power pick open and then punishing it. I'm curious how many more kind of tricks up Fnatic's sleeve that they have, but I cannot wait to see another best of 5 between these 2 teams to really solidify who is the 2nd best team, who is within touching distance to G2 between Origin and Fnatic.
Something that I heard a lot in spring was also Fnatic, they only play in one way and they play a lot towards bot. From also what you're saying, it seems like everyone's on the same page, but does that then mean that they have so much more in their arsenal, or are they playing the one style better? Which one is it?
So it's interesting because they were always a team fight team, you know, especially when you have a player like Reckless. That's just what you're going to be doing. You're looking for the later game team fights. And I still think that is somewhat true for them today, but it's a different way they get there. It's a different path because, again, it used to be all about putting resources into him, whereas now we've seen Broxah and the rest of the team have much more faith to play through other lanes. Bwipo in the top lane we saw in week 1. Just yesterday, we saw a heavy focus on Nemesis in the middle lane as well. So I think that different style of approach and not being as predictable is very good for them.
I mean, we'll use a lot of the language like a team fight team because I think it's fairly easy to like visibly see that and to attach to it. But I kind of think about Origin and Fnatic in kind of the same way, that they are so mature as a team and they understand where their power windows on the compositions that they create, and then they consistently act in those power windows. Where a lot of our teams, some of our new inexperienced teams, I think Vitality always a perfect example right now, where they try to force things when their compositions, when their actual lineup isn't strong, and then they don't have that consistency. It's why in a Fnatic game you see like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 big team fights, but they pick the perfect team fight and then they roll over you, versus a very scrappy game where there's a lot of skirmishes and a lot of fighting that doesn't go right.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that maturity doesn't equate with, oh, we've been playing together for 2 years, right? It can come in different ways, and that's why we see Vitality is struggling, but they have adapted with their new roster, with that change in the mid lane, and they are growing. So finally, if we're adjusting expectations, then what is different from what we're expecting for Fnatic from spring to summer? Where do they end up?
I mean, so honestly, I feel like it's fairly similar for Fnatic. This is still a team that you're looking to get into finals at the very least and try to get tested against G2. We still look at G2 as the clear favorites in the split overall, but this team should be trying to best Origin and make it to the finals against G2.
We'll keep track of their development, and one of the other teams that has been a very positive surprise so far is Rogue, a team that was ended up in the last place in spring, has 2 wins already, which is as much as they had in spring after only 3 games. How impressed are we with this lineup coming from the Polish Ultraliga into LEC summer?
That's really impressive what they've done so far. If you're watching Ultraliga, then you're expecting these guys to be ridiculously dominant, because they were hands down like the best regional team. Even though they got knocked out in groups at EU Masters, I'm still confident in saying they were like...
Did you expect that they would show up as such against the LEC caliber players, though? Because that was the big question.
Well, so something that I attribute a lot to rookies in LEC and just any professional league is pure talent. Like next to how much have you developed a player and kind of refined a player. I think the actual talent on this roster specifically is like through the roof. I think this is one of the most talented lineups that we have in the entire LEC, and whether that can get rounded out to turn them into like a playoff team is something we'll see down the stretch.
You want to put some names to that?
Yeah.
Inspired, Larson, I think 2 ones. I think
So
Finn has potential as well.
Because I agree that they've played really well, right? But I think it's kind of a leap to say that it's one of the most talented rosters we've seen. What is it that excites you so much about this Rogue lineup?
And a reminder, Foxy, we're in the best region in the world.
We are. Well, I just think from a pure talent and like the P word that I'm not sure I'm allowed to say, but potential. Yeah, I'm not
you
allowed
can say it. It's all
I just think like having watched these guys play against kind of regional league opposition, I think when you stack them up against people, when they have the confidence that they know that they can kind of perform, yes, doesn't always translate when you then go up to the next level, when you go into the LEC, but I think just the way these guys play, the way that they read the game and the very cerebral approach they have to playing League of Legends is something to me which really stands out, specifically in Inspired and in Larson.
Yeah, that's the key thing that I'm glad that you brought up that I really want to gravitate towards is a cerebral approach. Normally when you see a team come with like a bunch of inexperience, they kind of rely on muscling through. You know, think about like the SK self-made mentality of like, I am so good, so just put me on the carry and I can force games and force victories. Rogue are not like that. They have the talent that they can keep even with some of the first 3 matchups, the tape that we've seen, and then they're actually quite creative with their macro play. They get a lot of their carry through team fights and setting up objectives. It's not always perfect. You can still see some of that.
I was going to say, we've only seen 3 games.
You can still see some of that inexperience, but it's actually quite interesting to me that this is how the team wants to play the game, that they want to be, you know, we talk about like the team fight team, the smart team, if you will.
And we need to move on, but is this Rogue a playoff contender for you?
Right now, I would say no, but this is a team that's goal should be to make it into playoffs, right? You have a lot of new players. We've only seen 3 games, so it's very hard to give a firm, yes, they're a playoff contender, but they have the ability, I think, to grow into that by the end of the split.
They should aim for it for sure. Another team we want to talk about is Misfits. Of course, they had a lot to prove after spring. We've said it so many times. So, yeah, my question is kind of, should we just drop that moniker of they have all this talent and this, you know, super team when it's not coming out? Should we look at them at a totally different way coming into summer? And what should that be, Foxdrop?
I'm not ready to give up on them yet.
Okay.
Not to give up on the name. The names are just too big for me. I really think so. You know, you got Soaz, arguably the best European, perhaps even Western player of all time as far as his achievements have gone. You know, when you have Febiven, who achieved a lot, like the Faker Killer when he was a rookie on Fnatic. Gorilla as well was probably the biggest like
The keyword here is was.
Yeah, precisely. But I'm still living in the past a little bit.
Okay.
So this was only.
Since we jacket.
What the hell was that about?
Okay.
Whoa. You're next, by the way, Frost. she's dumped on Ender, then it was me. You're next. She's working her way down the line, executing each one of us.
I formally apologize. That was so unnecessary, but
I
I
love
just
it. That's quality banter, that is.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I thought you would appreciate it since you're the banter master. But anyway, I'm sorry to cut off your point.
Nah. That's basically it, you know. It's just, I still look at Misfits and I still think these guys have it. They can be like perhaps even a top 3 team, potentially. Yeah, $1 million question.
Could be. $1 million question. We saw Kirei in the lineup. Again, 1 game sample, his favorite champion. Fantastic start. That game was basically donated to them. Is this the guy they're going to have to do it with? And is Maxlor not in this equation for you?
I have so many questions about that. So used to work as a coach, and in my experience, like, I 100% would love if Misfits came out in the open, gave some interviews with the players, and were just like very transparent about internal communications. In my experience with other teams, when you have a situation like this, it creates sides. That teams, management, players, whatever, they say, I like this guy better, I like this guy better, and you start creating a tally. And if we say that Misfits have so much superstar talent on that lineup, you know, what the hell is holding them back? What the hell happened in spring? It seems to have maybe turned around for summer. Then you have to think it's internal issues that they're trying to clean up. And I think when you make a swap like this, if it's not handled in the most delicate, professional way, it can just cause everything to burn down. And so I'm super curious if it's all like kumbaya, everyone holding hands in the game house, or if everything's going to be on fire.
I mean, when I hear Musi come out in an interview and say it's different communication styles between these 2 junglers, that immediately sets alarm bells off in my head, because I usually don't think there's like different like versions of communicating. I think there's a better one for your team and a worse one for your team. So when Kirei comes in, he brings a better communication style. He also performs in game 1. Yeah, I say he's going to stay in, and I would be surprised to see Maxwell return anytime soon.
Wow, okay, well, we'll have to see. Obviously, we have to trust the process when it comes to Musvi and his team and Misfits, and we'll be a lot the wiser today because Misfits is playing with Kirei against OG. But the last team I want to talk about when it comes to expectations and resetting what we expect from them is Team Vitality. The team that has now lost 9 games in a row if we include where they left off in spring. And we're starting to sound like a broken record, right? Individuals are not as good as they were. The team play is not there. They can't seem to translate any early game lead into any big advantage. What else is there to say, and how do you fix that?
Oh man, why'd you give that to me?
Solve it, Foxdrop. Solve the Vitality problem.
No, because you have a kind of a different vision, you know? Like, we're constantly kind of talking about this in the office. You come in with your more holistic vision of what you've seen in their performance in the last couple of months. So what do you identify as the blockers?
I think Vitality, they always strike me as a very emotional team. If you're out there, if you've ever been to LEC, or if you can hear it on broadcast, they are so loud. Like, they're shouting all the time. Like, anytime they get a kill and stuff like that, anytime something good happens, that kind of team, I think, if they just get that kind of spark going, you reignite that a little bit, I really think they can just take that and run with it. And we are not far from the 2018 Worlds Vitality that made that like heroic run and were really the kind of engine driving Europe in that tournament.
Well, that's why I wanted to get at. No, and if they get back to that level, that won't be enough because EU as a whole is evolving. Is that the issue we're dealing with, Frost?
I mean, it's not so much that Vitality like plateaued or stagnated. They actively took like 4 steps backwards across the board. It feels like the only guy who's actually living up to expectations right now is Cabochard. Jizuke's slipped away. I mean, the conversation for your top 2 mid laners, you're like, okay, boom, Caps. Boom, Nuke Duck. Who do you then put in third? And the fact that it isn't Jizuke's name is such a shame because that was his destiny. He was supposed to be the next iteration of massive EU mid talent, and unfortunately, it just feels like it's out of his grasp. And don't even get me started on what's happening with the mental boom in the bottom lane right now.
Yeah, it just has to change. Ender, I know that you thought long and hard about what is going on with Vitality, so share us your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise, really, that Vitality have gotten off to a very disappointing start. But we've seen teams start a split 0-3 before. Yet it feels very different with Vitality. We expect more from this team. Barring the one single change in their roster, this is the same team that impressed at Worlds last year. And Vitality set high goals for themselves. We were excited to see how they would grow in 2019. This was supposed to be the year that they challenged for a domestic trophy. And they got off to a good start. For most of the spring split, they were the 2nd best team in Europe, but they imploded in the second half of the split and have not looked the same since. The question used to be, how high can Vitality go? But the question now is, can Vitality even survive? Because it has been 99 days since Vitality have won a game. I think this is the result of a loss of confidence and trust across the team. Attila and Jacktroll don't look like they're playing on the same team. They consistently make embarrassing mistakes in lane. Yesterday, Attila died at level 1 versus Sonataric. How is that even possible? That is not acceptable. Then there's Mowgli. He's getting caught in the enemy jungle and making regular coin flip plays. Now, if you're a Vitality fan, all you hold on to is Cabochard and Jizuke, but those two are not enough to win you games. We've seen Vitality struggle before. You know, they came into Summer Split last year hot and then started to fall off. So they made a change. They brought in fresh blood with Kikis for a new perspective, a new team dynamic. When things are looking down, sometimes all it takes is that one change. And if you pick up a win after that, everything starts looking up. You get your confidence back. But I think this roster has already peaked. And without some change, I don't think this team will be picking themselves back up anytime soon.
Go out and win this war for me, yeah? For the family. On 3. 1, 2, 3.
Well, Yamato definitely trying his best with the group to motivate them for the matches that come, and it's kind of easy to say all it takes is momentum, but I don't think that takes away the main issue is that they haven't been evolving. And even if they have a upwards trajectory, once again, I'm not sure they're going to go higher than they have before. And ultimately, maybe that's what they're struggling with.
It's such a conundrum talking about Vitality. Nothing makes sense. For them to fall off this hard, this soon, it really... It flabbergasts me. I still think there's a little bit of the old Vitality left in them, but they're running out of time to show us.
I agree, and it's difficult. It might seem to you guys that we're going really hard on Vitality, but I think it is because where they came from and how they were the catalyst for so much of EU's kind of motivation and success with last year's Worlds as well. So we want to see how they evolve. Let's take a look at the games today and who Vitality is playing. There are a lot of interesting games. I think Misfits versus Origin is obviously very, very good. And Vitality, well, if you talk about momentum, if you manage to win versus G2, well, then you're off to a good start.
I mean, that would be the best thing that could ever possibly happen to this team, but going to be a very difficult one for them. I think the Misfits Origin game, as you pointed out, is super interesting too, mainly because Kire yesterday we saw do super well when a First Blood was handed to him and he had a massive level lead and just like ran over the game. This game, we get to see him on a much more level playing field, and it'll give us a lot better read on this Misfits team.
That it will. Well, so far, of course, in the race for Superior Analyst, you guys at home, I am so surprised. You are hard smurfing. I don't know what you're having for breakfast. It's crazy. StatsBot also decided to stop inting at 4 correct predictions yesterday. I'm happy to be in the middle of the pack, but the fans, what's going on?
They have to be cheating. There's no other way. They know something we don't.
Because you suck at this. They're cheating.
I'm doing better than you.
1 point, Ender.
1 point's all it takes to win it all.
Yeah, but we're all playing second fiddle too. Yeah, you won with 1 point. So you know that's what it is. So LEC fans, keep hitting us up with your predictions at LOL Esports on Twitter because you're doing great. Now, in the first couple of games, we are learning a lot. We're also taking a look at some of the new players in the league and the players that have stepped on stage here in the LEC for the first time. So we wanted to highlight some standout performances, starting with Rogue's Inspired. We've talked at length about Rogue as well, and I honestly think that is a really positive sign because none of us had any expectations for this team, but these rookies are showing up.
Yeah, Inspired is really impressed, and specifically in his early game, I think he has a really good grasp of how different lane matchups work out and how he's able to find these early game ganks so consistently. It's something we see a lot when new junglers, new solo queue junglers come into the LEC, is they usually have successful early games, but the fact that Inspired has been so every single game he's making this happen, it is really impressive to see.
I think it really helps as well the fact that he's very comfortable and familiar with his surrounding roster as well. They're all playing mostly together in the Ultra League as well, so it's not like he's a rookie stepping up into an experienced lineup where he's just got to find his way to fit in. He already knows where he fits in with this squad because they're all his mates from the Polish League.
Yeah, fantastic. It's working out for Rogue. Someone else we've mentioned already and we'll see again today is Misfits' new jungler, Kire. He made his debut yesterday. Of course, he doesn't qualify as a rookie per se. He's played, of course, for a long time, also in the TCL. But Foxdrop, if you get your Kindred and if you get this kind of a start, you are a happy bloke.
He's very happy. Excel's not very happy. You hate to see coin flip smite plays. It really does. It triggers me so bad.
But what does that tell you about Kirei.
Right, well, this is the perfect survey, man. And to be honest, the better thing to look at isn't strictly that level 1, but what he does with that lead, because that is something that is very important and very impressive from Kirei to have the confidence to not only get that lead, but then to actually use it and translate it into something that Misfits can then use to win the game.
Was it really harder than just, I don't know, just pushing the advantage and keep ganking
You
the
say
lane?
just, but that's not
That's
as
why I
easy. It's not as easy as it sounds, especially as a jungler, especially when it's your first game on the LEC stage. I think that a lot of jungle is up here, which is why so many of us are just back crazy. But
Hello?
yeah,
Not me.
You're a jungler too, mate. That's why I said it. So, but Kirei, he really impressed me. But I am looking forward to the game today, where he's gonna have to start up most likely on a more even footing from level
Do you
1.
want to add anything, Ender?
No, I'm done.
Maybe you have something to say about this third guy, Sakurai in the top lane for SK Gaming. Of course, the newest addition to that roster that made playoffs in spring and really did better than a lot of people were expecting out of them. He put up a fight against Wonder and G2. Where do we see this guy going in summer?
So honestly, Sakurai was super impressive at EU Masters. You know, he was a top lane player that always tried to get very winning matchups for himself and a lot of jungler intervention as well. So he could just snowball away with games, have insane leads over his opponents. In week 1, he got those good matchups, but didn't have the same pressure to be able to have that dominance. Whereas yesterday against G2, Selfmade put a lot of pressure up on that top side. Sakurai ends up solo killing Wonder and giving me a lot more hope for him moving forward in the split.
Yeah, Sakurai was very reliable in EU Masters. He was one of those guys where it didn't seem to matter what happened to him in his lane. You knew he was going to be a dominant threat. He won't be able to dominate quite so much in the LEC, but still, as you mentioned, if SK put resources into him, I do expect him to be really scary as he matures, as he gets confidence going through.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Also, one of 2 Croatians in the league. The other one is, of course, G2's Perks. Now, we mentioned Perks very often. We mentioned G2 very often. But one man is often overlooked, a fan favorite and key part of their massive success. We are, of course, talking about Caps' dad. He's great. He's always just there. He has the Caps' dad t-shirt or jersey on. He has the flag. This is from MSI, I believe. But he visits almost every event that they're playing at.
Yeah, and this guy deserves an MSI medal, is all I'm trying to say. He's there every step of the way.
You give it to him. Just kidding. Obviously. No, good stuff. And if you guys don't follow Caps' dad on Twitter, it is @Caps_dad. He has a gold mine of tweets, and they are just all so wholesome. He has some of the best emoji use I have ever seen. As we see there at the top, the hashtag LEC. Very good. Thank you, good sir. Then OG Fnatic, the hearts, I assume, who was on blue and red side. Jungler Danes, fire. Hype Viking top match with some balloons. I mean, it's good. It's wholesome.
I mean, there's so many of these emojis I haven't even seen before, like the balloons. We got the, music symbol down there, treble clef. Like, I don't know what's going on.
I think this one on the right needs a bit of explanation. My farmer family said, also the blind hen finds the corn.
When making an effort often. So this was in
You forgot the kissy
to
face.
Yeah, kissy face is there as well.
the kissy face. So Medic tweeted that he did really well in the predictions. He also predicted Rogue over Vitality. And then I think this is something like even a broken clock is right 2 times a day. My farmer family said also the blind hen finds a corn when making an effort often.
If you keep trying the same thing, eventually it'll work out. So if Meta keeps saying words, eventually one's going to land.
Yeah, just a shout out to you, Michael. Fantastic. Thank you. Please keep tweeting. The more emojis, the better. For now, though, we are going to look ahead towards our first game as XL and Splyce look to bounce back after yesterday's losses. XL is a rough one to talk about because we had some issues or question marks about the roster change of Mickey coming in before summer. What do we think now?
Well, so my thoughts on Mickey is that we can't really judge much of anything from yesterday's game. Of course, the level 1 invade went horribly wrong. And, once you get set behind like that, there's not a whole lot you can do. But for me, I still think this is a roster move that Excel needed to make. Because when I see the 4 players around him, you have 4 decent players. But 4 decent players aren't going to go anywhere in LEC when they're all on the same team. So they needed to take a risk. Mickey is that risk. He might crash and burn, hopelessly on this team. Or he could be the star that helps them rise to the standard.
Is this the guy they need? Is there no one else on that roster that can carry as him, or what is the deal here?
I think when you had Special and XL, they just added to Ender's point where you had decent people on the team, but XL lacks a spark, and Mickey is a bit of an unknown quantity. We've seen high highs from him. We've seen low lows from him. Definitely one of the more controversial figures in the league scene. And I think if XL, they took a bit of a gamble bringing him in, But as you mentioned, I think it's a game where they had to take because they do need that firepower from the mid lane.
All right, we'll see. It's hard for us to judge, of course, with only one game sample, but let's see what XL's coach has to say before our first game. Well, not that much. I think it's coming in a second.
That was some incredible insight, though.
It was.
I feel like I learned a lot.
It's actually ready now. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Shox. Laure here, and joining me today is David Lim, the new coach for XL, previously with Schalke, with Team Liquid and Clutch Gaming in NA. So how is this new challenge for you? Can you tell me about it, new experience as a whole?
I really like the challenge of working in Europe. I think the players are much better here, and it's actually just so much more fulfilling as a coach to work in Europe because they're very driven, and I've just been loving it so far.
Really glad to hear that. Although you didn't have the best start yet, still looking for a win. We know it's not very dramatic yet, but we also know how important these very first wins can be on a psychological aspect. So how is the team right now?
So obviously it's a little bit disappointing, especially how we lost the games, but I think the team is actually surprisingly in pretty good spirits. I think Mickey is actually, he's actually joking about it. He's like, hey guys, like we can still win, don't worry. And he's actually helping the team. And he's only been with us since the end of week 1. So I'm pretty happy with how the team is. Obviously, I'd be happier if we had wins, but we're not in some dire state as of yet.
I agree. And you'll be looking to get the first big W today against Splyce. Is there any insights you can give me on your prep against the team?
Beat them in the early game.
Beat them in the early game. Yeah, that's the right message. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll let you get back to the team, and good luck for the game. Now back to you, Shox.
Well, good stuff. I'm going to go out on a David limb here and say that it might be hard to beat Splyce. No, you have to like let it go. Otherwise, it becomes too obvious.
I really liked it.
Okay, great. He's not giving too much away, and I think he's doing exactly what his job is in interviews like this, right? He's not going to come out and say, it was horrible. These are the worst game we've ever played. There's no future here. I think this is what he has to do. It's good to hear that the atmosphere is good. But will it be enough to beat Splyce? Because even though Splyce lost to Schalke yesterday, I'm not ready to say that, all the hype is overblown or whatever. I believe in Splyce for this split, but we do have to see some more consistency out of them, as is always the question.
I mean, if we're looking at yesterday's game, ultimately it was so much about big 5v5 team fights. And I felt like Splyce were very competitive throughout. Ultimately, it came down to draft for me at the end, where they couldn't seize their windows in the mid game where they needed to be able to in order to take that win. And it came down to some crucial team fights that unfortunately they're on the losing end of.
And what David Lim said in that interview, where you have to beat Splyce in the early game, is very much stylistically how Splyce have been so consistent against teams in the lower end of the table in the LEC and in the EOLCS when that was a thing as well, because they are very good at not losing games early and then taking it to those team fights and having superior execution, sort of like we saw yesterday, except they just didn't quite have the firepower needed to be.
Yeah, because I would also say we've seen development out of Splyce is that even like yesterday when they didn't have biggest lead or a lead against Schalke, they were super competitive in these team fights and actually almost turned that game around. One of the guys who played out of his mind yesterday was Chachi, and it is risky because you can't always want to rely on that move or on your top laner kind of solo turning these things around, but I mean, it's good to know that he can do it.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a really cool play here. This one around the Baron where he TP's in a little bit late. I hope we actually get to see the play here. Yeah, because he actually sits back in the wings and uses that ult to turn it around right at the very end. It's a super cool play where Schalke didn't actually see him in that bush because of a control ward that was placed earlier, and it sets up for this massive AoE.
Yeah, and also outside of Chachi, Splyce played those team fights very well, but this was hard for them to fight into this game, and you don't want to find yourself in that position. So is there anything we can call out that we want to see in immediate development that is going to make Splyce better?
Look, Splyce is a playoffs team, consistently,
yes,
but they're not able to break into that top 3. It feels like they're always looking from the outside in, and the player that needs to improve most for me is Humanoid. Yesterday, he had an abysmal performance on the Aurelia, even in their win last week on the Silas. He went 2-0-0 out of 15 kills that his team had, so I think he can have a much larger impact on these games, and he will be the player that has to improve if they want to break into the top 3.
Yeah, Mickey's on the other side of the rift today, isn't it? So that's a pretty spicy matchup to watch.
Yeah, I think it's awesome because Mickey, of course, is going to want to prove all the haters wrong and say, hey, I can bring something to this team. And on the other side, he has a rookie Humanoid who also wants to show that he can get Splyce to that next level. We're starting today with XL versus Splyce. Let's hit the rift.
Thank you, Shox. Good afternoon. I'm Dracos here with Frost, getting ready for our first game of the day. It is Excel versus Splyce. Mid lane was kind of the rounding out point there on the analyst desk. Do you agree? Is that like, is it all eyes on mid lane? Is it do or die time for Mickey and Humanoid in week 2?
I'm going to say no. I think what was really interesting is that Excel's coach said that it's all about beating them in the early game.